Yes, well, welcome back. We're with Dr. Alex Douglas, who's the independent member for Gavin. Gavin's on the Gold Coast, a very big electorate down there on the Gold Coast, as I said, a man whose whole family is steeped in politics, but he was a senior member of the National Party in Queensland for many, many years, and his wife was also a senior member. You could say, in fact, they know where the bodies are hidden. But Dr. Douglas resigned from the government on a matter of ethics and principle, and he may care to articulate that for us. But if I could just start with the question I asked of Glenn Lazarus, surely someone like Heather Brown, an outstanding journalist with the Australian newspaper for many, many years, is a metaphor of what this inquiry is about. She dared to raise her voice in opposition to the Wagner Airport, which was approved by code assessment, not impact assessment. So that means there were no opposition could be ventilated to it. There was no environmental impact statement, no noise impact statement, no community impact statement, no compensation. Because of that, she finds herself burgled, ransacked, not once, but twice, as a refugee in her own home, and has no voice. This has not been investigated. It was raised in the federal parliament. Do you see this as a metaphor of the kind of Queensland that you have been fighting against and which caused you to resign from the government?
I do. I think this is exactly what has resulted under this LNP government in rapid-fire time in 2 years. And it is everything that every Queenslander never wanted and we never wanted to see again. And what's happened to Heather has been mirrored in a whole lot of other instances. In fact, Ray Hopper, who's the member for Condamine, had some similar things occur to him. And when he was complained about it and stated in the Parliament, they denied it had occurred. You know, the sort of behaviour and the contempt that this government holds Queenslanders in is absolutely disgraceful and is the reason why they need to go. And they certainly need to be investigated prior to that, and that's what we're here about tonight to talk about in part.
You just used the word contempt there, and I find staggering a statement that you've recently put out where you've cited that the most recent parliamentary estimate hearings were reduced to 2% of the practical available time for questions when compared to previous hearings. If nothing else, this inquiry will provide the scrutiny that the LNP government deserves. I mean, that is ultimate contempt, to reduce the time for questions to such a paltry amount. Do you see this inquiry as an opportunity to do things that otherwise a parliamentary questioning or budget scrutiny would provide?
Yes, I do. And I think that if you can't do it within a Queensland parliamentary format, then the only other format that's available to you within a reasonable time frame or that has some sort of relevance and has an openness and transparency has to be the Senate. Which is, as most people would know, is the State's House, as opposed to the House of Representatives being the People's House in the federal sphere. And so when I hear people say, this is disgraceful, this is an abuse of power, who says it's an abuse of power? And who are they to say so? Have they read any of our history? Do they understand what the Senate's role is? Of course this is the role of the Senate. If the Queensland Parliament can't allow itself to be scrutinised, then the Senate is the appropriate place for it to be scrutinised. And it will do so. And that's what's going to happen.
And what do you think Queenslanders will think if the Premier or the Deputy Premier refuse to participate?
Well, I think that most people would say they've got something to hide, Kristina. I mean, you're a former state parliamentarian. You know what it's like. It's a bear pit out there. But if you can't expose yourself to scrutiny and have a bit of transparency, then in fact you're not fit to be there. And this Premier, by saying, well, he'll go to court, he'll do everything he can to try and deter people from having to ask him questions or even answer some questions or make submissions. Well, he doesn't deserve to be the Premier, and nor should he have been there in the first place. And the case of Heather Brown is case in point of what was really been going on and what these people really do in real life to Queensland.
See, one or two questions need to be asked, don't they? Because I am getting letters in relation to the billions of dollars involved in resource projects. Now, one of these terms of the motion is to investigate the approval process for the development of projects. Projects can only go ahead if they get the approval of the government. Now, you know and I know $40 billion worth of coal seam gas projects were approved. Simon Marsh has stated this public. Simone Marsh, she was the environmental officer, and she said that she was asked to give a bankable outcome. She was told to do this in half a day, $40 billion, and the reality is the contracts had been signed for those coal seam gas projects before any approval process had been contemplated.